Hello, my friends. This is Rick. This is your seat at the table. As typical, every now and then I like to get on and just rant and ramble about something that stuck a nerve or pricked an interest. Last week, I was watching videos from the role player Café fellow, and he was talking about, he did one on what immersion means to him, and he saw the same video that I believe that I did, that Robert the narrator put out, and I've seen a few others in the past too, and so it got to me thinking, what exactly is immersion and role play and things like that for me? Now, I break it down in a number of things. And I've said it in a previous video not that long ago, that when I, for me, gaming experience is the game itself. We're sitting down to have fun, but we're using the tools and the material that's been provided for us. As an example, I'm looking at the stats and the mechanics and the dice that go along with it. And we know we're going to do a dice roll because we're going to do that because that's what we do. And some of the elements are out. It's not necessarily scripted, although there's some scription to it. There's a bit of a formula. There's a lot going on. It's a lot more involved than just sitting down at the table and playing a game of cards or a tabletop board game. Because if we want to, like the role play cafe fellow said, if I want to play a board game, I will play a board game. So it's the same concept. And for me, part of immersion is part of all of this together that works together and gives the atmosphere, the flavor, the feeling that I'm having a good time, I'm having fun, I'm truly playing, and I'm playing a game, but I'm playing a complicated game. And sometimes too complicated can be an issue, sometimes not enough complication can be an issue, but that's neither here nor there. The idea of how do I get immersed in these things? Well, for me, and this just me specifically, okay, so I like playing Star Wars, and I love Star Wars in general, and I've got scores and scores of novels and the game material and movies, etc., etc. And I can envision the broader, bigger world through having much more additional material that's not at the table. What I'm bringing to the table in my mind that helps me visualize a setting, for example, is this ability when I read a book, it's like watching a movie. I can envision the scenes play out in my mind as the words are translated to images in my head. And the same goes for just about every system. So obviously, there's I love MERP and Middle Earth role playing games uh, because I started reading Middle Earth before I understood that there was a game to go with it. And then this just fed into that wider range of love. And it's like I said, we're back to the Star Wars, and Star Wars, the game that goes with it. It just builds upon it, and all the other additional information. Whether all these books ever get played at a table, if I'm in a Star Wars campaign or I'm running a Star Wars campaign, doesn't matter because I have this knowledge tucked away. It's even if I don't remember verbatim what everything's said and done, and it's added to the flavor and the world view of a particular setting. This translates in part from decades and decades of game play. So I got into Dungeons and Dragons when I was very young, and it's been a big portion of my life in one form or another ever since. And I too have taken my effort to make my own game systems. Some were just kind of very blah. One I spent better part of 10 years and I've done some videos on, and I struggle with it because it's so big, it's so vast, it's so crunchy. A lot of people probably would have trouble with it. In my mind, I don't care. I didn't create it for you guys. I created it for me to enjoy and for me to have fun with. And at that point, I had other friends who got involved with it, and they helped play and play test it and improve over time. It grew and grew and grew into much bigger versions of what the original stuff was. And then, of course, I've said this in the past. I got a I got a what I'm guess is called a bogus contract deal with Golden Games to see it get published, and they've never done a damn thing with it. And somebody told me that they basically probably just took a look at it and says not really what they want to do, but since I have a signed contract with them, so if I were, somebody else was to publish it, they could come in later and go give me a piece of that. I don't know. At some point, I'm going to see it through. I keep poking away at it. It's like would-be novels. I've written a lot of them. I'm still procrastinating terribly. I work at a page here and there, but not nearly as much as I ought to. And eventually I will get it. I will put it out there on Kindle because I spent so much time and effort. It's the same reason why we love this hobby so much. We immerse ourselves in it to a very deep degree. And from that, we want to become involved, become part of this great thing that we love. This is why we do these videos in part. I mean, be truthful, folks. You guys do as many videos as I do, maybe less, maybe more, but they're very deep and meaningful, and they have content that you care about, or you wouldn't do the video, right? The same reason why I'm sitting here doing this thing on immersion. So back to the immersion part. When I come to a game table, I'm a lot more serious than I used to be when I was younger. I take my time's valuable, and Robert and I agreed with Robert in a different video on that subject that if I only play once in a couple months, I want that play to matter, and I just soon not have everybody talking about something other than what we're doing, and not running off like it's casual Sunday and worried about the sports score on the TV and chatting with somebody on their cell phone and et cetera, et cetera. I don't expect them to hold on their cloak and turn themselves into a grand actor, which is what a lot of role play sometimes can degenerate into. I know that there's a level of comfort for everybody, and some people are much better at it than others. And my role play comes with a lot of issues, of course. I'm not an actor. I'm not trained to do this sort of thing. I'm not a voice actor, so I tried it occasionally, change my voice and have a little bit of flair with my particular character or with the NPCs involved. But trying to remember that all the time and using the same voice for the same thing when it comes back later is not always going to happen. Uh, but at the moment of the action, right? So this morning, as I was looking at my D&D Beyond play-by-post game, which there are days where it goes days and I don't hear nothing from anybody, and I'm thinking, are you guys even out there? Are you actually participating? It doesn't come as fast as I would like it to, and I've taken a much less hands-off approach than I did the first time I did a D&D Beyond game to try to be less of a train conductor and more of a narrator or facilitator. So, but when the action occurs, I have one character who's out in the marsh, in the dark, facing off against a troll, and he is wailing away at it. Unfortunately, he's just not doing the damage he needs to circumvent the healing capabilities, the regeneration capabilities of the damn troll, based on the 5th edition's rule on the take on the troll. And there's another group that's the larger group that's nearby, and they're slowly becoming more engaged in it. They're aware there's something going on out there. They can hear the yells and the howling. The one individual fires an arrow and he gets a natural one, and he's like, well, I just footbarred it anyway. But in my head, the character standing up in a skiff as the rest of the group is trying to decide who's going with and who isn't to go intervene in this whatever's going on out there, because obviously somebody's fighting something, and they know, they all by now they know it's a troll. And he's an archer, so he fires off an arrow in the dark and rolls a nat 1. Now, in this case, the arrow misses its mark by a wide margin. And he's like, okay, that's a boot bar. So because it's D&D Beyond and it's a play-by-post, I'm allowed the luxury of having different threads for different characters in some cases. So the group is in a group thread, which is where the archer's at. The individual who is out there fighting the troll by himself uh, doesn't know anybody else is out there officially. He's his own thread, him and the troll. And out of nowhere, out of the dark, an arrow just went whizzing past, and it missed him and the troll by a wide margin. That I was able to add that into the play. I didn't have to, but it gives the player who's out there by himself an opportunity, if he's paying attention, to realize that there is something else out here that may or may not be on his side. It's hard to say at this point, but it potentially allies that he could call upon if he thinks to do that and act on it. Meanwhile, the people back at the boat, all the archer knows is that his arrow went wide. It went wide and it into the dark, and they have a general direction of where the noises are coming from. It's a few hundred feet out, so it's a little further out than the one character has 60 feet of infravision. So all this in my immersion in my head is in a few short moments of reading the archer's actions and attack. I visualized this as an actual scene in my head, and it was easily for me to add this scene or have this scene flow over into the other character who's fighting against this troll and not having a whole lot of good luck with it, giving him some, an opportunity. But we're back to that immersion thing. I envision through the words and the actions in my imagination of this poor soul out here with his axe, just swinging away at this big monstrous stooped over long-handed thing. They're both up to their waist in muck, and it's got two heads, and the smaller head is taunting him, which is my habit of, because I know the guy and he's easy to get riled up if you taunt him in the right way. And I can see this whoosh, this sound of an arrow come whipping out of nowhere in the dark, and just this shadowy blur whiz past to the right, just far enough away for both, to have done no damage, but to be noticeable by, the combatant. All this was immersion. All this took place, you know, in 30 seconds of reading their post. And in my head, I thought, ooh, and then ooh, and then ooh, right? To me, that's part of it. And the fact that the mechanics were involved too. You know, the guy made his attack roll. He also pre-assumed he made his attack roll, his damage roll, all that stuff on the assumption. Then he realized he'd roll at one, because in D&D Beyond, it's an automatic thing. You just click on it and it'll do it for you, right? And I didn't know that a red number and result is the nat one. I didn't know that. And so he had to, he said, I don't know if you didn't know this. And I thought, hey, I didn't know this. Thank you for letting me know, because now I kind of know. Of course, remembering it matters. But in this case, all his stuff was mechanically based and in action. He climbed in the skiff, and in the next round, I got my friend Kenny's out here in the marsh with the troll, and he's got a dragonborn, and he waits till the troll gets up and screams in his face, and he breathes fire back at it. So he did land a little bit of damage, right? But unfortunately, he's only used that's once a quote short rest, so once a day or something like that, once a couple times a day, whatever. He's used it. He's fired his bolt of fire. He's fired his breath weapon, and that's that. But in the process, it did a couple things. It damaged the troll, but it also basically set up a flare, letting the other people know where he's at. And it was just enough of a light that the archer was able to snap off a shot, right? So all this played out, and I'm excited about it because I feel engaged and involved, and to me, is in the true spirit of gaming. Now, there's no role play at this point. I mean, there's a little bit of interaction between the characters and stuff. I mean, there's an NPC captain who's a halfling, and there's a second halfling who's kind of like a stowaway who's got a very voracious appetite and is young and is excited and wants to go help, but isn't sure what to do, and it starts asking some questions. And when nobody else answers, the captain as an NPC, me, will put in a little bit, and then when obviously the group's either and not, I don't know, right? I'm still waiting for the others to do what they're going to do and decide. And meanwhile, I got the counter at the top. This is an encounter, combat round 3, and in brackets it says 16 seconds. So since they became aware of the troll fight out there, the fight with the troll, 3 rounds have gone by. It's just only 16 seconds. There's not a whole lot of time. Meanwhile, they're just now getting their skip up. We're back to the not railroading the party, but also going with the party and seeing that immersion. And part of that is the GM, as the game master. There's a different type of immersion. Part of that's the excitement of improvising and seeing the characters the players come up with novel ways or interesting ways or unusual ways or shocking ways of dealing with whatever it is or whatever they're trying to do. So one of the other characters says, well, maybe we need to launch a smaller boat and go after them. And so he starts looking around and says, is there a boat or a skiff? And I never included that as part of the riverboat's equipment. But there's no reason why it couldn't be there. So I just said, as a GM, and under the guise of him looking around, as he notices the skiff lashed to the side of the galley house, and it has a couple short, it's got a long pole and a 10-foot pole and a couple paddles stuck inside it, and so there you go. The skiff's there. The guy's he come up with the idea. He's rewarded with it. And there's no reason not to throw it there. It made sense, right? If he asked for a wagon, I might have gone, no, there's no wagons on the boat. But having a short, small skiff attached to the boat somehow, sure, why not, right? So we're back to a different type of immersion from the game master perspective. Now, when it comes to the role play, to me, interaction between the characters, meaningful or non-meaningful, humorous or serious or what have you, interaction between the characters as players, that's role play in my mind. Right? I don't have any of this elaborate things where we must have to do because if we don't find the skiff, we're going to be able to go out there and character playing a character role or taking on, I'm going to put on that, whatever. Because traditionally, as I grew up playing and as I played most of my life, majority of the people who play, that's role play to them. This is when they're interacting with their character. Their character is in the game and interacting with its environment, its foes, its friends, its allies, what have you. As long as there's a layer. So now, some people are better at it than others. I'm very descriptive. I can be very descriptive, especially when I'm dealing with a literary environment where I can type stuff. Much more natural with that than I am this version. I have issues with stuttering. I have issues with, I know what I want to say, but sometimes I don't know how I want to say it, and it just kind of takes a minute. Sometimes I'll have especially now I've gotten older, I know I had a whole thing in my head, and then suddenly what did it do? Would it go? Sometimes I'm smart enough to, write down copious notes whenever I can, and sometimes not. All right. I mean, we're back to the what do you do and how do you play and what's your idea of role play. If you're playing and you're having fun, there's no wrong way to role play. I mean, honestly, there's not. If everybody's sitting there, it's like, the guy said there in a role play cafe, in a microsecond, in a moment, we can be having that conversation. The character is having this conversation or making an action or doing something. And then the action or the role play ends. The mechanic portion takes over, or this discourse between the players of strategy and tactics and general commentary and whatever goes on. or dice rolls are made, and perhaps we're looking up a chart or adding or subtracting, or we're doing whatever we need to do, and then we re-immerse ourselves back into the game, in the game world environment where the characters are now doing whatever it is the mechanics were driving them to do, or we were advocating for them via mechanics and dice rolls, or whatever this conclusion of the table discussion has come up with. So what is the players going to do next? Now with a play by post, we have some luxury of being able to separate these by having a open conversation thread and a game story thread, and then private threads. So if the characters split off, they can actually have two separate story lines, and those people in the general story now become part of a secondary thread. So, and they're only accesses to those who are there. So if they don't come back later and tell everybody what they did or didn't do, that's part of the adventure of play by post. But at the table and stuff, it's something we take as a natural part of the play. When you sit down, I've had many sessions in my lifetime where we sat down for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and played very briefly, and then went back to work or went back to our class or whatever. When I was back in school, it wasn't uncommon if we had a break to go run out and spend 20 minutes or 30 minutes working our way, continuing our story, our adventure through whatever campaign we were doing if we had all our stuff with us. There were other times where, we'd sit down and we'd literally bogart an entire weekend. We play and sleep, play and sleep. I don't do that anymore. Yeah, between marriage and work and just age, I just don't have that luxury to do that sort of campaign stuff at that level anymore. So it's always been part of the play in my mind. So immersion comes in increments, and in a portion, for me, it's a personal thing. I mean, I can, just like I can read my novel and I can see the action, I can see the conversation, the expressions of the people in my imagination. The immersion is watching these people play and participating and doing my portion of it and my part and envisioning how their actions and what things are going on in their head. It's also, as much of the immersion is the argument that once we sit down to play, we are now immersing ourselves in play. So as long as we don't distract our immersion, and others don't distract ourselves by doing non-game related things, so we don't come to the table and do a podcast that's while we're trying to play a game, unless we're doing the podcast about the game, which I've never participated in one, so I couldn't say how that works or not works. But not going up and watching the TV over in the corner, keeping up with so-and-so's gossip going on over there, or everybody diverting into some other thing. The occasional rule session where we got to stop and get the books out and go find out, well, this is what we want to know. This is what the character wants to do. Can they achieve it within the rules? Should it be allowed or not allowed? That's all part of the game, as long as it doesn't dominate the entire session. Because then that can become boring. Because if you get one person who's it's not their way of dealing with it, it can be a detrimental thing. So I think in part that's one of the reasons over time, if you get a good group of players that you're used to on a regular basis, and you're comfortable with how they handle things and how you handle things, it is a very valuable and wonderful thing. Right? It's when you get new people in who are struggling, or you get people whose idea of immersion and role play is vastly different from the majority, that it becomes awkward or detrimental to our own immersion. See, so I mean, I don't know. There's no right or wrong way of play. There's plenty of ways to alter and abdicate and influence the play. But as long as we sit down and we're getting together and we're showing some sort of common group mindset, because there's a lot of technical terms. We talk a lot of stuff these days about social contracts and the rights of the players and the rights of this and that and the other thing, because we're all adults and we're immersed in a real world full of that sort of crap, and it's hard to divorce it from the table. And I think that comes up even at a young age, and uh, it's part of the mess that that comes with playing and trying to be serious about our play. That's my opinion on the subject and on role play. Like I said, uh, if you're having a good time, you're enjoying what you do, it's a good thing. If you can immerse yourself in it and become solely, put those blinder ons and all you see, because I've been in those sessions too where everything is just spot on. We're in the groove. Everybody's in the groove, and it just flows until it stops. And sometimes it flows for 5 minutes. Sometimes it will flow for 5 hours. And we will sit back and finally remember those sessions for a long time, for a long time. And for the rest of us, that we become obsessed with this hobby, and we call this, some people call these childish things. And my argument with them is just to drop a huge stack of those rule books in front of them and say, yeah, okay, kitty, uh, go ahead, talk to me about it. And kind of chuckle, and then they get that kind of disgusted look or disillusioned look. And I'm like, there's, you know, play and there's play. What is sports on any level but play? We only call it professional sports, but it's professional play. And there's a lot of stuff that goes in it, and they either immerse themselves in it or they don't. I know a lot of weekend football lovers that just are sports guys, and they're just absolutely crazy about that stuff, and they're immersing themselves in it in one form or another. Well, this is my sports, right? This is my idea of, uh, of fun for the weekend, and when I can't play, you know, and I read when I can, which helps keep me connected, helps give me ideas and inspiration. It's play of the mind. When I can't read or I don't have time, I I do videos to help put my 2 cents worth in and to promote things. You know, I've got excess of 500 videos now, in part. Uh, there's it's not about making. There's never going to make a penny off any of this stuff, but it's my way of connecting to the social group that we call the gaming world, and being motivated to do something and being a little bit part of something, and why I do my videos on reviewing the games that I possess. Many of them from a lot of your older hats, your older G's, as Robert would put it, and you know full well what I'm talking about here. We've been in this for a long stretch, and there's a lot of fun memories and a lot of not so fun memories and a lot of stuff we've accumulated over the decades and or passed on, got rid of, gave away, replaced, right? I kept as much as mine as I could, and I wish that there's some I still am at now, because I couldn't envision 20 years ago other than just a bookcase full of stuff for me to sit there and occasionally pull something down and on a week, on a slow day, and go through it. Or sit there in the throne room back there, and while you're having your morning constitutional and going through a chapter or page or something, and that's how my day goes, and I never envisioned 20 years ago that I would be doing something like this, that I could even do this, because I never envisioned this sort of thing. This medium, even growing up and becoming what it is, the fact that I can do this and do it for free, it's just it still boggles my mind sometimes. Uh, but it's a great thing. This is part of that immersion. So, hey, I've already taken up too much of your time, and if you've stuck through this far, thank you all for sticking in there. And this is Rick, and your seat at the table. Have yourself a great weekend.